Greetings, Rabbi Aaron Box here from Temple Beth Shalom, back for my podcast once again this week after being gone last week in Philadelphia for the CCAR conference. I want to start this podcast today with a question, or I would say with a phone call that I received earlier today. I should say that he called the temple, but I left a message and then I called him back. But the message that I received was he was someone looking for a teaching Seder. He wanted to attend a Passover Seder, and he is a non-Jew. He is a devout Christian who believes that he is required, because he is a believer in Jesus as the Messiah, he is required to live the life that Jesus did, and that includes attending a Passover Seder. And then he mentioned something about to the secretary here. He mentioned something about the year of the red heifer. So I kind of thought that I was going to have an interesting conversation to begin with when I spoke to this gentleman, just because of a couple of things that he said. But just to be on the safe side, what I did was I reached out to, or not reached out, I looked online for a search about the year of the red heifer, and I kind of had my idea as to what it was, but just wanted to double check to make sure. So, as it turns out, in order for the temple to be rebuilt, so we're talking about the third temple, part of the requirements of that happening would be the need for a perfectly unblemished red heifer that has never known yoke of labor. And in order for that to happen, in order for the temple to be rebuilt, these red heifers have to be raised. So it's actually a really interesting movie. I think it's on Amazon Prime. Not a movie. It's a short series called. It'll come to me in a second. Dig, D-I-G, Dig, and it's about kind of like this story, kind of like this question, the idea of the rebuilding of the third temple, or the temple being rebuilt to make it the third temple. Well, here's the thing. What would have to happen for the temple to be rebuilt? That would mean that the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, which currently sit on the Temple Mount, would have to be destroyed, and the temple would then be rebuilt. Well, that would bring about World War III, I believe. But if you believe in the idea of the Messiah coming and rebuilding the temple and all that kind of stuff, then you would believe something like the year of the red heifer. Well, as a non-Orthodox, liberal-minded Jew, as a Reformed Jew, I can tell you that I'm not looking for a Messiah, an individual Messiah. What I'm looking for is a messianic period, a time on earth when all human beings are treated equally, the same, with the same rights and benefits, privileges, when you can walk outside of your home and hug your neighbor and love their differences as much as you love the things you have in common, when we can truly ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love our neighbor as we love ourselves, that would bring about a messianic period, or a messianic time. I believe that the Messiah is, or God is, within all of us. And it's up to us to be able to bring about this messianic time. And in order to do that, we have to truly live out the words, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So I'm not interested in a Messiah coming and doing that. I'm interested in rebuilding the temple, I'm interested in all of us living in a time of harmony and peace on earth, where we can love each other, support each other, our differences and our similarities. Okay, now let's move a little bit to this idea of celebrating Passover the way that Jesus would have celebrated Passover, and and attending a Seder because that's what Jesus did. So let's be clear. Number one, the Passover Seder that we have today is an invention or creation of the rabbis who lived several centuries after Jesus. So Jesus would not have had a Seder meal like we have one today. He may have had certain aspects of a Passover meal, but it certainly wouldn't be a Seder like we have today. That's number one. Number two, if you really want to celebrate Passover the way that Jesus would have celebrated Passover, then that means you need to fly to Israel. You need to have a perfect, unblemished sacrifice with you to be taken to the temple that doesn't exist to be sacrificed. So we have no temple right now. We can't possibly celebrate Passover the way that Jesus would have celebrated Passover. And the only way that we can have a temple again, as I said earlier, is if the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are gotten rid of, which nobody wants. I shouldn't speak for everybody. I don't want, and I don't know anybody that does. Meaning, there's no way for us to live in harmony and peace in order to have the temple rebuilt. There's no way for us to live in harmony and peace if we're going to rebuild the temple to make it the third temple. That's just not going to happen. So, when I was an early first or second year rabbi, I did lead a Passover Seder meal service at a church in Atlanta, and it was very nice. I crafted this service with the minister and with some members of their lay leaders of their church. And while there were certain aspects of the Passover Seder that I would have at my own Passover Seder, there were certainly things about it that were, I don't want to say cringeworthy, but almost cringeworthy, things that don't really belong in a Passover meal. Which, let's get back to Jesus for a moment. Jesus could not have been having the Passover meal as his Last Supper, because he gets arrested that night. And if he was having his Passover meal, the people who, according to the New Testament, that arrested him, the Pharisees, the high-ranking Jewish officials, they wouldn't have been working on Passover Eve. It was a chag. It was a holy day where you don't work. So it's not possible for Jesus to have been celebrating Passover Seder as his last meal, because the rest of the story doesn't work out. Yes, it is possible that Jesus was in Jerusalem for the Passover holiday. And it is possible that he was having a meal sometime around Passover. But it was definitely not a Passover Seder, because that is a holy night. It's a holy day. So, the long and the short of this is simply that while our Seder is open to anybody who wants to come and experience what a Passover Seder is like, there are certain understandings that have to be met before that can happen. We are not celebrating a Passover Seder like Jesus did, because Jesus didn't celebrate a Passover Seder. He may have had a Passover meal. He may have had a meal around the time of Passover, but it wouldn't have been a Passover Seder because, A, he couldn't have been arrested that night because the Pharisees wouldn't have been working, and number two, the Passover Seder, as we know today, was created several hundred years after Jesus' life. Okay. if we are truly going to love and respect and treat each other with kindness and understanding, then we need to sit down and think about what we're asking when we're asking. When someone says, I would like to accompany you at your Seder, I would like to be at your Seder, I would like to experience what a Seder is like, by all means, you are welcome to come and do that. But if you try and mimic it or do it yourself, it should not be done unless you're a Jewish person or a rabbi leading the Seder, or another Jewish leader leading the Seder, because the Seder is a Jewish religious custom, a Jewish religious ceremony. So, I feel like I should have one of those, the more you know, ding, stars going across, but you can't see it because this is a podcast. I do hope that people will feel welcome to come to our Seder. I know I will be inviting as my guest the two interim ministers and their spouses to join me at my table for Passover, and I hope that everyone is able to really understand what it means to love your neighbor, to respect your neighbor, and to celebrate differences and likenesses. And with that, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you all, or I'll hear you all, or you'll hear me, or something like that next week. Take care.